Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Welcome to Ignition Sequence. I'm John Murphy, and today we're diving beneath the surface into the cutting-edge world of undersea engineering. Our guest, Randy Brandenburg, is the Senior Vice President of Engineering at Proteus Ocean Group, and he's part of an ambitious effort to create the world's first underwater research habitat of its kind. Often described as the International Space Station of the ocean, Proteus is poised to revolutionize how we explore and protect the blue planet. In this episode, you'll learn how Randy's unique journey from his roots in rural Iowa to a career spanning aerospace, defense, and undersea innovation has uniquely prepared him to face the challenges of constructing a home beneath the waves. We'll explore the engineering breakthroughs making Proteus possible, the critical role of the blue economy, and how underwater habitats could transform our relationship with the ocean. It's a conversation full of vision, ingenuity, and hope for the future. Randy, welcome to Ignition Sequence, and thank you so much for being on the podcast.
John, honored to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation.
You're very welcome. So we're going to talk about, International Space Station, underwater, great concept, and it's kind of mind-blowing to think about it. But how do you, as an engineer, well, first of all, what's your background, but how do you even get pulled into something like this? How do you find your way, navigate your way to a project of this scope and this kind of challenge?
Yeah, great question. It's been a long, meandering path to some extent, but full of interest and interesting stops along the way. I grew up in the heart of the United States in the farmland. So I grew up a boy surrounded by corn and soybeans, kind of a do-it-yourself tinker. If you're in the middle of farmland, when things don't work, you own the reality of having to fix that. So I got very interested in mechanical orientation, how things worked electronically. As I kind of grew into my high school years, I also kind of mapped in with a desire to serve in the military, to serve our country. And I am very interested in one of our military schools, the United States Air Force Academy. And I found it really was a nice balance between leadership, the service of the country, but also a strong desire to be involved in engineering activities. Like a lot of young people coming out of the 70s, we all wanted to go to space. The International Space Station was emerging, the space shuttle program. So it's felt like a nice in-between for me to put that service to work at the Air Force Academy. I spent active duty. I worked in the United States Air Force. My eyesight failed a little bit, but I was an engineer coming out of the academy. They put me to work looking at the modernization of what we call the Cheyenne Mountain Complex, is where we command and control most of the space activities for the United States and Canada. I did leave, I separated from the Air Force and went to the reserves, and I moved into the aerospace and defense industrial base, worked for a company called Raytheon Technologies. Mm-hmm. And I had a chance to really do a lot of interesting things there, ranging from weather satellites to air traffic control systems. But really the last 15 years is where I really kind of honed my skills on engineering leadership, leading complex, multifaceted teams, to do everything from designing complex combat systems for the world's most advanced destroyer to working with allied nations in the Western Pacific and Europe and delivering capabilities that allow U.S. naval forces to cooperate and work collaboratively. So part of that journey and the tail part of it, I had the opportunity to lead our undersea portfolio at Raytheon. So think of everything undersea from effects to sensors to infrastructure. Again, chance to work closely with the submarine builders, the shipbuilders. What was interesting about the undersea domain is how important it is to the security and safety of our country and our economy, but also how little we actually really know about what's going on.
Right.
Every time we put something into the ocean, we learn something new, John, every single time. We know very well from surface and above how things react with the environment, the physics around that. But every time we put something in the ocean, we learn something new. I said, what an incredible place for a student, a young man coming out of the farm country to say, hey, I can learn something new and be part of these innovations as they move forward. And that's kind of how I got into the undersea innovation. I was very fortunate to meet Fabian Cousteau in a very early part of his journey as he's creating Proteus Ocean Group and the Undersea International Space Station of Undersea. He was looking to put together a set of industrial partners. He came to our company, talked to us a little bit about it. The company wasn't at the point where we were really able to partner with Fabian. But when he left that room, I said, the world needs exactly what Fabian's doing. And I told Fabian, hey, somewhere down the road, if my path changes and you're still looking for somebody to be part of your team, please keep me in mind. And then a few years ago, I left Raytheon. His team reached out to me and I said, hey, I'm all in. This is exciting vision. The world needs something like Proteus, and I can't wait. And I'm honored to be part of just an incredible team.
Well, before we take a deep dive into Proteus, I'm just very curious because I'm from the Midwest too. What state? Where are you from?
From Iowa, eastern Iowa, right on the Mississippi River.
Ah, see, I'm a Nebraska boy. I'm a Nebraska
Okay,
boy,
other side.
Western
That's
Nebraska.
okay.
Yeah. And I also tried to get into the Air Force Academy. I tried like hell to get into the Air Force Academy, but just not smart enough. Just didn't have the SAT test scores to get it. I was a pilot and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
I defaulted into, mindless entertainment. So that's
Look
what,
at where you are. I think it's treating you
yeah.
okay, John. You're doing okay.
Okay. All right. All
By the
right.
way,
So
if it makes you feel any better as a reservist, I work with young men and women attempting to get into the Air Force Academy, help them through the admission process. I could not get into today's Air Force Academy class. They're that smart, that
yeah,
ambitious,
right.
that engaging. So it's really a testament to the young people coming out that want to serve their country.
Absolutely. And both men and women doing extremely
Absolutely
well in
fantastic.
all the academies, Air Force, Naval, West Point, so on and so forth. Yeah,
100% right.
I had all the I got every qualification you could have. I could fly an airplane. I got the senatorial congressional appointments. I was a top 10
Yeah.
graduate in my class. Just the SAT, I choked on the test. I just choked on the test and I didn't get in. So
Got it.
as I like to joke, joke, it was not only good for me and my overall career, but it was good for the United States of America that I wasn't up there flying some $100 million aircraft.
There we go. One door opens, another one closes, right?
Yeah,
Just kind of keep moving
absolutely.
around.
All right. So back to the topic of this podcast,
Yes.
Proteus, undersea, international kind of space station underwater.
Yeah.
Now this is not something new. I know a lot of people don't know this, but there was a lot of underwater exploration and underwater labs in the 60s and 70s when Fabian's grandfather, Jacques Cousteau, the man who invented the air tank and all that kind of stuff,
Scuba. Yeah.
there was some active investment and development in underwater research, and then it kind of went away. Tell us what happened if you know.
Yeah. Well, again, not being alive or active engaged in this back at that time, certainly alive but not engaged. I think the reality is, I think as a human exploration moved forward and we discovered limitations of human involvement undersea, there was actually a advancement in robotics and automation that said, well, it's interesting that we can put humans at that state undersea, but if I can use automation techniques, early days of robotics and sonar was emerging that could do very detailed mapping of seabed floors, it became a risk versus reward, I think, kind of venture. That hey, I can probably get enough information to allow me to do whatever my business purpose was with automation systems and not put the risk of putting a human in undersea in that environment. There were a few tragedies, unfortunately, as we were learning how these saturation scuba systems should work. So, and I think it became a question of investment. Is it really the government's place, or should industrial players be investing in these kind of undersea structures? So there's a gap as where the humans kind of set the initial trail. Automation, sensors, robotics filled the gap, I think, for the last 20, 30 years. But now we're at a place where, hey, maybe we went too far. Maybe we've cut the human out of the undersea influence more than we should. And now our understanding, our belief at Proteus Ocean Group, hey, now's the time to marry these back together. It doesn't have to be either or. It's not either or in space. Why should it be either or undersea? It's really the strength of the human and the machine collaboration that really is what the blue economy, the ocean science requires. So I believe that's been the evolvement over the last 40 years with some fits and starts along the way.
I'm sure you totally remember the undersea world of Jacques Cousteau specials that National Geographic would put on the air,
Absolutely.
2 or 3 times a year. And they were just, as kids growing up in the Midwest, landlocked
Yeah.
kids seeing these magical places and underwater and sea life and coral beds and just deep caverns and stuff like that. Just mind blowing and very exciting. And one of the things that Jacques Cousteau did is he lived in this underwater lab for 30 days. And they filmed it and they did a whole special about it. And you kind of learned how, you had to be very careful of the kind of gases and air that was being
Right.
piped in there. They used a lot of helium, so they had high squeaky voices, which is
Hmm.
hilarious.
Right.
Um, but now Proteus, this concept for Proteus is something completely different. We're not talking about days or 30 days. We're talking about months and potentially years. Tell us about the vision of Proteus and what it's going to take to get us there.
Yeah. As you said, this kind of evolved from the work that Jacques did. And then Fabian actually went up to Jacques back in 2014 by saying a reap of Aquarius for 31 days. And during that time that Fabian sat down there, his realization was, hey, undersea habitation is the missing tool in the toolkit of ocean exploration. And he said, we need to take Aquarius and we need to take this into a modern day representation, take advantage of new technology, new operations, new processes. So really as he kind of witnessed this and had this inspiration about the habitat being a center of the next generation ocean exploration, he formed Proteus Ocean Group. And we've now taken this the next step and say it's not just a habitat, but it's really a ocean exploration platform. That's what's required to take ocean exploration. And what we've really done is taken the business and created four, I'm going to call them structures. I call them kind of stools, structures that support the stool. One leg being technology. So think sensors, to do everything from monitoring to assessment of geology, to tracking blue carbon. So there's a variety of things we can do on the sensing technology side. There's a media section of the business that gets back to what you said, that the one of the big gaps is the inspiration, the ability to reach down to
Right.
K through 12 educational programs and make them engaged with the ocean again. So that's another leg of the platform. Third platform being investment. There's incredible emerging blue technology companies showing up with fantastic ideas, but no source of investment to take them from that initial concept into prototyping or MVP, minimal viable product. So there's a third leg of our platform stool is investment to allow those players to be successful. And then the fourth being what we're here talking about is the habitat and the ecosystem that goes around that. So all those things together would create a ecosystem that allows us then to put humans in collaboration with robotics and automation into the ocean to really serve a purpose to advance the blue economy. And that's how we've evolved the thought about that 31-day trip that Fabian did back in 2014 and passing up what his grandfather did several decades before, is create a new experience that allows business to move forward in blue economy aspects.
Now, you're a senior VP of engineering on this Proteus project, and we're going to talk about the specific design itself of this platform and habitat where all these scientists are going to live and work and hopefully learn so much more about the ocean. But tell us about, what do you think is harder, space or underwater?
That's a great question.
As
I
far
think it's
as far
probably,
as sustaining as far as
oh,
sustaining human life long term?
yeah, I think undersea is going to be a little more complicated just because it's still
Yeah.
a new environment. I'm sure we feel now it's the same way the astronauts felt back in the 60s. But if you look at advances in everything from just feeding the astronauts or to feeding aquanauts, right? We now have the ability to grow sustenance off of using hydroponics and aeroponics. We do not require soil anymore to grow food sources. Medical physiology. We now have the ability to monitor the health and safety of individuals and catch early indicators of health issues through wearable technology. We have the ability to drive energy through sustainable sources to allow people to maintain presence undersea for long periods of time. We have advanced materials which address issues like biofouling, the buildup you see on the surfaces of ships and things, vessels that sit under the water line. We have advanced materials and techniques to address that. So the science has moved. What we will do with Proteus is create a set of accommodations, internal environment that are not that different from a laboratory, a schoolhouse, a hotel room, to really create an environment that humans feel comfortable and that can satisfy their day-to-day, week-to-week needs. As you said, to support extended periods. If it's weeks or a few months you want, great, we can do that. If it's a few days, we can support that as well. So we're trying to create a flexible habitat in its environment to allow the humans and the businesses that they're associated with come to address their needs.
And I like the name Proteus. Now, Proteus goes back to Greek classic
Yes, it
mythology.
does.
He is the son
Yep.
of Oceanus. And apparently, and I looked this up, I have to read this, here, but Proteus has the ability to assume different forms and to prophesy. And so the name is very deliberate, Proteus. What you talked about the various things of what it's going to be like. Tell us about the design. If you were to imagine visually the design of this Proteus
Mhm.
platform and this habitat, how big is it? How deep are you? Do you plan on putting it on the ocean floor? How many scientists or people can live and work there at a time? Kind of what's the big grand vision of this undersea space station, so to speak, underworld seawater station?
Yeah, no, great question. There's probably about 5 questions in there, so let me start at the top. We were very focused on user requirements. There's 2 ways you can approach a project like Proteus. One is you can build something based on your image, what you think people and businesses will want to do in it, and how they want to leverage it for moving forward in the blue economy. Or you can talk to users and generate user requirements. So we spent a number of months, 9 years, working in market verticals to identify potential users of an undersea habitat as ecosystem. So we have a good understanding of, say, vertical like space. What are the different things you would like to do with a team of astronauts slash aquanauts undersea? So that impacts directly our design. So we've captured those requirements, and we are starting to input those in our conceptual design activities. Now, I will also step back and say Proteus, it's really a merger of two orthogonal projects that come together at the same time. One is a platform, and I'm on the aerospace and defense. So think of an aircraft carrier. Aircraft carrier meets Disney's Magic Kingdom. That's really what Proteus is about. Aircraft carrier, a platform. A platform, it has to provide basic services to everybody who shows up. That means power, accommodations, maintenance. That's what a platform does, right? It has to be multifunction. It has to adapt to, you may have a user and has something very specific robotics, may have another one that comes and says, hey, I'm going to do aquaculture and food preparation. But the platform has to support both of those seamlessly. And finally, a platform has to evolve as technology inside it changes without redoing it or ripping it apart. So those are important parts of a platform that drive us from a technology engineering perspective that we need to account for the life of Proteus. Now, the Magic Kingdom part, you can eat off a floor or off the ground at a Disney theme park. A piece of trash lasts about a nanosecond before it's scooped up. So Disney anticipates issues, risks, problems, and are right in front and address them before they're happening or instantaneously as they happen. So that's a Magic Kingdom moment. The other thing that they transportate logistics. So if we're going to have people for weeks and months undersea, we need to be able to seamlessly move logistics and supplies, food supplies, linens, equipment. It needs to happen seamlessly with the operations outside them. Disney does it remarkable deal. You would never hard to find a logistics supply action at Disney World. And then final thing is the inspiration or capturing of the imagination, which is the most important thing. How do we reach in? If you threw up a picture of Disney's Magic Kingdom anywhere in the world, somebody would say Disney. We need to capture that same moment with Proteus. So we're going to bring those together. That's the needle we thread across a platform of Disney Magic Kingdom that make Proteus and its ecosystem a reality.
It sounds like what you're describing is that not only are you trying to engage the science community and the global investment community to invest in exploration of our oceans to understand more of it, but you're also trying to pull in a global audience to be emotionally engaged to what are they doing today under the water, you'll have live webcams and things like that. So people can follow along as you go down this road of exploration underwater. And that's one of the things that work with NASA and the space program when you can see the astronauts floating in the space station, and they're taking calls, or they're doing experiments, and they're floating around, and they're letting out they're opening up a little a bottle of ketchup, and the little ketchup blobs float, and it's whatever it is. It's kind of fun, but it engages the curiosity and the imagination of just everyday people. Sounds like you're trying to do all of those things at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. And our vision is it's a platform, but it's a global platform. We'll have multiple sites that will have multiple missions, but they will interconnect where they can share those experiences, share data. A learning in one part of the world, does that translate to a learning in another part of the world? I had this issue with ocean currents and what happens on this side of the world when you do the same kind of a weather pattern. So that interaction is, as you said, is something we think can grab the imagination of the science community, but then the interaction with the environment around it is something that become educational material and will reach into the K through 12 classroom, but also be part of documentaries and editorials. So the little bit we've done to date, we have billions of impressions already on our media products that we generated as we've started our initial excursions, and we expect that to grow. That's why the media part, the leg of the stool called media, is so important. That outreach and that engagement, John, is critical. And all these facets that need to come together and work in harmony for the vision of Proteus to be realized.
Where are you now in the process? What stage are you at? And the reason I bring that up, there was a project back in 2014, something like that, called Sea Orbiter. And, Sea Orbiter proposed a mega project. It was by a French architect and an oceanographer, Jacques, another name Jacques, but not Cousteau. It's
Yeah.
Ruggieri, who intended to be a floating research laboratory in the ocean. The project began construction in 2014, but has not made it past the initial phase. So we're a decade down. Where is Proteus in its phase of development and possible construction?
Yeah, no, it's so when you look at the Proteus ecosystem, back to the technology pieces, we have sensors in the water at our target site today. We'll continue to build out that sense. So we're collecting information, data about our ocean environment that we'll use to build digital representations that we'll use to manage and operate Proteus. But we're also feeding that information to global networks with agencies of interest who want that hyper local information about sites, particularly the one that we use as our target site. So we'll continue to build sensor networks. We're continuing to work with the host nation, particularly when we look at everything from sustainable energy sources to job creation. That will continue. And then we're in the early conceptual preliminary design aspects of the habitat, other parts of the ecosystem itself. So that will mature as we forward into 2025 or the next couple of years. The business is targeting a in the water date still of 2027. Some kind of a minimum viable product, both to validate the business opportunity and to start, jumpstart the learning, so we can continue to scale and grow out the Proteus habitat and the structure itself. The project on Sea Orbiter. So I had the great honor of being part of some very early conversations with Jacques Rogeri, who's actually on a board. He's an advisor to Proteus Ocean Group. What an inspirational,
is he
bright
really?
human being.
Oh,
He is, yeah.
wow.
He's on our design
Okay,
board.
wow.
So he helped with some early design iteration. Yeah, he's been fantastic. Bahar actually did the first industrial design. You see his design in a lot of our media. We've been very fortunate to have a rich set of expertise as we've gone through our journey, which for Fabian has been over a decade now. For a number of our team, 3 to 4 years. It's like I said, no journey is the same. The parts of the investor discussions I'm part of, there's a lot of education. People want to understand, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? A lot of the traditional requirements that venture capitalists look at for return on investment, tying up people's money is different. So, but there are people that understand, say, I get what you're doing. Let's keep pushing forward. And we continue that outreach, that engagement. And people are saying, this is important. The blue economy needs an asset, a platform like Proteus to move forward and really make the blue economy, again, it's about scaling and speed. The blue economy needs to move faster, and we need to scale up quicker.
Yeah. I was watching a video with Fabian talking about the Proteus project, and he was talking about $135 million investment to maybe, build the first prototype towards that. Where are we on the global investment side? And, is it going well or is it hard? I mean, I know any investment is hard. I live in Hollywood. Trying to get $10 million to make a movie is hard. Separating people from their money is difficult and challenging. But for really forward-thinking individuals like the Mark Cubans of the world, the Elon
Mhm.
Musks of the world, this is seems like to be right in their wheelhouse. And there are many more people in that stratosphere of economic viability to be able to fund something like this in one day. Elon Musk could write you a check for $135 million,
Yep.
wouldn't even blink an eye, and you could be funded and start building, or at least getting closer to that. So how is the funding part of it going?
So there's active engagements talking to investors constantly, to be honest with you, John. I will say the investment that Fabian is talking about is kind of an end state, kind of vision, the kind of perfect habitat environment. As we've been on this journey, we've said, hey, there are incremental steps that have required less investment that allow us to learn. There's a lot to learn until we get to that end state. So we work a lot with investors, with technologists, and say, hey, and this concept of MVP, minimum viable product, is an important one. There's a representation of Proteus ecosystem that allows us to validate technology concepts, the innovations that we want to be part of our original design. It allows us to validate the business model. How long do people want to stay undersea? How much are they willing to pay for access to tools and technologies and the seabed floor? And the concept of operations. How do I safely and securely move logistics from shore to the undersea? How do I consistently ingest information about the coral and seabed floor and put it into global networks? As we learn those, we will iterate on the design. The MVP will become a first iteration, will become a second iteration, till we get to that final utopia moment that Fabian has discussed. So I will say the investment community is much more aligned. I think that incremental walk up that I just talked about, and I think we're finding the funding to allow the front end of that is happening today. Always need more. We're always reaching out to people who want to be part of this journey. You're right on the. I think the investor like an Elon or Mark Cuban could write a check tomorrow. It's interesting. I always try to tell people this is a little bit like the airline industry. I think it's very difficult to vertically integrate. Only a guy like Elon can really afford to do something like that. So there's really a couple ways to approach it. I think we're very much like the airline industry. We need people. We need the Boeings and Airbuses to focus on core technologies, the airplanes. United, British Air, American, we're focused on the customer experience side. We give requirements to Boeing and Airbus, but neither those airlines are not optimizing how to build that airplane. That's up to Boeing and Airbus. But you know what? Boeing and
Mhm.
Airbus are not that envisioned when looking at the customer experience, because that's the other job of the airlines themselves. I look at us in this blue economy space. We're the British Air, the United, the American, focused on customer requirements and that experience, and we're relying on the Airbuses and Boeings to create themselves, and we will facilitate that. We'll give them requirements, and we'll put their technology to practice as we build out the habitat and this infrastructure for the blue economy.
What are some of the big engineering challenge? You're the senior VP of engineering of this project, one of them, one of the leads. And what are the challenges you are facing from a building, engineering, software design, all these type of, disciplines you look at when building anything? What are you looking at doing this underwater for long-term habitat? What are your biggest challenges?
Yeah, it is. It's back to that platform discussion we just had, and thinking like the International Space Station. How do I make sure I create a structure that every 3 to 5 years can be refreshed from the inside out without tearing it open, right? That's a big deal from a technology perspective. We want to be sustainable.
You're talking about like a modular design now to be able to do that, right?
Yep. So I need to be able to I need to be able to tear down walls and infrastructure and bring them out my wet porch and put them into a vehicle, take them to shore, and then bring the next generation things back in. That works if I think about how to lay things out in a modular fashion early on. It needs to be extensible. So John, I may start with a crew of 4 with a support staff of 2. But I may have another team says, hey, in 3 months, I'd like to put another team of 4, another crew or 2 right next to them. So I need to be able to extend the experience safely and securely in a short, rapid period of time as well. How does that happen? I need to trade off where I invest in terms of what happens in the habitat undersea itself versus what happens ashore. For instance, waste treatment, right? So we want to be as self-sustainable as possible, but it might be more cost effective to run waste back to shore if I'm close to shore. Communications, I want to have fiber into the habitat, but I may be too far away from land. I may have to run something up through a life support buoy and do it through satellite communications. So there's a number of traits that I need to go through to make sure there's a platform that can exist for 20, 30, maybe even 40 years to continue to stay relevant as both the customers change, their demands change, and technologies change. Those are the most significant challenges that we face and that we deal with every day.
A structure underwater for 30 to 40 years. We've seen shipwrecks galore, and we know what the undersea world does to structures after even 5 years. So what kind of things are you thinking about on the external side of the build out to preserve and maintain the metal integrity or whatever type of surface you're going to be using to just not be deteriorated by the salt water and all
Yeah.
the marine life that are there?
Now, it's a fair question. This design will have a heavy dose of acrylics. Part of the experience will be allow humans to engage with the external world, and there'll still be a heavy amount of acrylics involved. The material science has gotten much better since we did Aquarius back in the 1980s. There are marine grade stainless steel products, which are quite good against the corrosive nature of seawater and the ocean environment. But I really look at it as a layered approach. There's no one answer to say this is how you fix everything under sea, because that's just not the way it exists. But you have to take a layered approach. And it starts with the material selection. Just like I said, we can use marine grade stainless. It has a certain life expectancy and resistance against the environment. It then goes to coatings. There's an emerging science around you can coat materials to protect against that environment. And next goes to treatments. Ultraviolet light is a great treatment against biofouling. And then finally, you get to replacement. I think as you think about the structures and materials, you need to think through all 4 of those. Is it the right material? Is there a coating I can provide or coatings I can provide? Are there treatments I can apply when the other 2 start to fail? And finally, what is my replacement strategy? If I have a porthole that I need to replace, do I have the mechanical fittings to support that and to kind of take that easily in and out? Same thing with the external. So it's a layered strategy that we apply and we think through as we select materials and prepare our design, think through our construction.
Is one of your target sites Curacao?
It is our favorite jurisdiction of our first site is the island nation of Curacao. We have spent significant time there over the last couple of years working with the nation and identifying sites and starting to instrument our sensor networks and our potential sites.
So Curacao, for those who don't know, is an island just north of South America, the country of Venezuela, but it is in the Caribbean and the Lesser Antilles. It's known as the Lesser Antilles, and it's a sovereign nation or sovereign to Netherlands, correct? Curacao?
Correct. Yep. It's part of
Yeah.
the ABCs, Aruba, Bonaire, and Curacao. Yep.
Okay. So, what was it about that area that you selected as a target site to develop the first version of Proteus?
Yeah, there's a couple prime areas. Number one, the warm waters of the Caribbean are desirable for being underwater a long time. So that became an interesting data point. But probably the most prominent point about where in the Caribbean, because there's so many great diving spots, there's only 2 accreting reefs in all the Caribbean today. One's in Cuba, the other's in Curacao. So what a great place from a scientific perspective with coral reefs dying everywhere around the world. There must be things we can learn about how does a healthy reef react and what are the characteristics of this healthy reef that we can take those learnings and apply them to other parts of the world. So the healthy reef is certainly a big part of it. The host nation, the government's very proactive in ocean environmental science. They have a marine protected area. They've been very proactive about working with us to advance permitting, the geological activities that are very important part of building out the structure. The government is nothing but a great partner as we move forward, and having that host nation partnership is really important as we move through the early parts of the design and site preparation. So those are probably some of the main areas, to be honest with you, John, why we like Curacao. And so far, it's been great working with Island Nation.
How deep do you think Proteus is going to be? And are you considering multiple locations around the world at different ocean depths to get various variations in data and to see how life exists at 100 feet, how life exists at 1,000 feet? And from a design perspective, those must present even more greater challenges the deeper you try and get Proteus, because we know the terrible tragedy with that submersible
Right.
where it was
Yes.
all, just, imploded on those poor souls. These are all factors that you have to consider. So, but I'm just curious, at Curacao, how deep is it and how deep do you plan to go in other location sites?
Yeah, as we start this venture, our target depth, and they call it storage depth. I think the water air is it's an ambient pressure vessel. The pressure inside the same as pressure outside. So the storage depth is going to be right around 20 meters or 60 feet. Now, there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, if you get much deeper than that, oxygen can become toxic, and then you got to get into the mixed gases. But if you stay right
Mhm.
around there, basic air is some most people can work with and you breathe. So it takes some of the complexities and medical risk out of the equation. The second part of that, there's a large variety of study. The current reef-based Aquarius off of the Keys operates at that same depth. So there's decades of experience around diving, operations, mechanical structures. So there's a lot of learning we can bring forward into operations in Curacao, like there is off of reef-based Aquarius. We do intend to have other sites around the world. Our nominal state is we will continue to keep them around that same depth, again, for the
Mm,
safety operations, but we will
got it.
create excursions, probably smaller structures that have the ability to go deeper. Back to listening to your customers. A number of customers like the fact we'll be at a safe operating depth, but they also would say, hey, I would love to put a team at 50 meters, 70 meters inside what they call the mesophotic zone. That 50 to 150 meters is where we think the bulk of scientific discoveries will remain. And a smaller habitat to allow humans extended time is of desire. And part of our design process to create that and then all the infrastructure to make that a safe operating location. That's kind of how we're currently envisioning the structures and their operating depths. We will have robotics, John, as well involved. So we think of autonomous vehicles, either tethered or untethered. They can go off on excursions and do inspections to complement the experience that will be part of the human diving experience there at Proteus.
And do you have any considerations regarding now the extreme weather events and hurricanes and the intensity of hurricanes that are now developing across our oceans, and particularly in the Caribbean, where Curacao is? Are those considerations thought about as you design and plan to build Proteus?
Yeah, absolutely. When we do a site selection, we have a set of criteria we go through, and one of them is the extreme weather environment. What's the past 100-year storm experience, and what's the next 50-year projections? We've tried to identify areas that are somewhat protected. The area in Curacao we're in is in a little bit of a protected cove. Curacao is fortunate because of the Southern Caribbean; it does not get the significant hurricanes and storm surge that you see in the middle to north of the Caribbean. Um, yeah, and then we will so we'll pick a location that minimizes the impact, but we also build a set of infrastructure and safety areas that allow us in case we do get into an issue where something happens. So we can do it through design of the infrastructure, the foundations. We pick the right location, and then we prognosticate the weather. If safety is first and foremost. If we identify, anticipate a bad weather event, we will have enough advanced notice where we'll decompress the team, we'll get them out of there into a safe area. So those are the steps and the ways we'll address those potential problems.
When we see these extreme weather events and hurricanes on the news, it's so much focus on top of the water, with the wind destruction and the rain and the flooding and that type of thing. What do we know about what happens underneath the water, even 60 feet down? when a Category 5 hurricane comes through the area? What's going on underneath the water? Do you know?
We don't know as much as we should. We do know that changes, and we have sensors and robotics in some areas, so we can see the churning the sediment on the seabed floor. Currents start going in opposite directions at different depths. But we should be able to predict that better, knowing a storm at a certain current and water of a certain type have some kind of physical reaction. But the reality is these are things that we're still trying to understand better. And I think one of the reasons having a presence undersea could allow us to do a better job collecting the information and then putting those into forecasting or prognosticating models. So that's exactly one of the use cases or problem statements we'd like to get better at.
When you're designing prototype models, do you do that in a digital space and you apply extreme forces to this digital model and study what could possibly be happening before you actually physically build it?
Absolutely. I mean, that is current state of engineering design tools now, right? So use computer-aided design to build models. We can play with different structural types, different dimensions, different sizes. And as you just said, then we will just apply different forces to it and try to figure out where is the failure? Where does that happen? What joint does that happen? Does the material degrade? So we will create a digital twin. So through the design process, we'll come out with a digital as-built representation of what we put in the water. We'll then couple that with a digital representation of the environment it operates in. And then we can continue, then we can prognosticate, okay, when is a failure projected? When will a seal fail? Are we watching the flow of gases? Is a flow of gas coming, is it coming down? And why is it coming down? We can monitor the movement of people inside the experience, and we can say, well, hey, we have 3 people diving over here. This robotic activity is scheduled to be in the same direction. How do we make sure there's a safe keep out zone? So with these digital representations, we can do a lot of what if anticipatory analyses to say, is this a dangerous operation? Is this a better optimal flow of the people and activities inside the MPA? So we're very big into the digital engineering side of this. That goes back to my pedigree and it coming out of the aerospace and defense. I've seen the value of it. We can make a lot of early decisions about things to do or not to do or what to test more.
So, Randy, are there any new engineering milestones, breakthroughs that you've come up with in designing Proteus?
I think as far as milestones, the incorporation of sustainable energy sources is going to be a big one for us. And I need to do a variety of them. So I need to have a primary, secondary, tertiary source. So how we do that in a sustainable way is going to be an important part of our journey. We have, being the Caribbean, our first site, we have access to a lot of solar and wind energy opportunities. So the integration of that will be important. Probably the most significant is going to be the collaboration between humans and robotics. We're very anxious to advance the state, not unlike what they're doing in space, of saying, what is the right collaboration? How do you speak? You can't speak to a robot, obviously, under sea. You're in scuba gear. So how do hand gestures work and communicate with the robot? How do you give instructions? How does a digital representation of a human from shore interact with a robot under the sea? Can somebody sitting on mission control in Houston operate a robot sitting in the bottom, in 1,000 meters in off of the island nation of Curacao? So how we create these communication links, how we interact with humans and robots, and how we kind of really, I think, close the circle of data collection and assimilation into these global networks is really part of the big risk reduction and interconnection collaboration that we're trying to validate.
Can you take us through the inside of what Proteus would look like? And the most important question probably is there going to be a Starbucks in there?
Someday that may be version 3 or 4, but we'll get there. We won't be. It's going to be served. I think do it yourself early days. We're gonna have a design review in early 2025. So I don't want to give away too much, but you can imagine a central hub area, a collection of people for everything from dining to team meetings to medical, or probably a recreational area, a relaxation area where you can watch videos or do gaming. So think of a common collection area where the normal accommodations can happen. Then think of appendages or modules that can do if you provide everything from a VIP suite to a
Mhm.
high-end data processing center to a wet laboratory. So there'll be a collection of modules of different sizes and these are all tailored to whatever our user requirements. I say it's very important, this user engagement we're going through, to understand both how they would use these common collection of collaboration spaces along with the specific modules to allow them to do their research. So though functionally, that's what we'll have. We'll have opportunities or entryways for divers to enter and ingress, egress the habitat. They'll also be able to bring small to medium-sized autonomous vehicles in and out of operating garages to both maintain them, to operate on them, to store them. And then we'll have areas obviously for decompression where people will need to depart. And we'll have some really, really impressive visualization spaces where a human can feel like they're in the middle of the ocean experience. So I won't say much more. That's going to be a great, I think, design review in early 2025. But Starbucks is probably at least 3 or 4 iterations past that.
Well, I mean, there could be. I mean, it sounds like there could be an opportunity. You talk about like the blue economy, the investment of undersea exploration. That's one way to kind of do it. Sponsorships of, I mean, that's kind of the American ways. We're used to it, but that's, if Starbucks could have the rights to have that coffee shop inside this location, that could be worth tens of millions of dollars, as far as just exposure to them, but an investment opportunity for you. One thing I want to follow up on, are you designing this that somebody like me or just who just science curious could buy an experience to come stay there for like a weekend? And once this is up and running and kind of observe the scientific research that's is going on, or is it all strictly just science and research and trying to learn and know more about our undersea world?
Now we're very, as I said, I go back to we are a platform. We're there to generate revenue and align ourselves to user experiences. So not unlike
Great.
in space, where somebody's writing a check, a huge check, go spend 45 seconds before they come back down. We have the ability to configure our Proteus experience to handle these, what we call them citizen scientists. Come down, spend 2 or 3 days. We'll give you some oceanic experiments to be part of, and you'll get a chance to contribute to have that experience. And they can be high wealth individuals, they can be academic, they can be these K through 12 students that we're trying to engage. So we really have a
Great.
variety of experiences that we're going to tailor Proteus to stand up to, John, and the ability to switch rapidly in between them. So that's again part of the platform requirement. So we should, it should be hard to say no to somebody who really wants to be down there. We should be able to accommodate a number of different type of users that want access to our space.
When you talk about investment in this, what percentage is government investment? What percentage is private investment? Or like the Elon Musk's or somebody like that. And what percentage of it would be just, you know, the Starbucks, corporations, steel companies, whatever, who want to invest on this new technology and this new frontier of exploration?
So the company has started from day one wanting to be a for-profit entity. So we've been very careful, to kind of drive investment finance of people that want to invest in for-profit activities. The government is very interested. Government agencies, I'll use that word at a top level, is very very interested in participating in a entity like Proteus once it's built. But I'll give you the Navy as an example. The Navy's capital is all going to building submarines. They don't have a requirement
Mm,
a venue really to invest in the front end to capitalize something like a Proteus. So we're working very closely with people that want to invest in the blue economy engine, in which a Proteus type will be part of that. I think as we mature into design and construction, you mentioned earlier Starbucks. There's a number of consumer brands that we talk to all the time that have interest
mm.
in participating, being part of this. I believe as this becomes wildly successful, governments will want to build and probably own their own variations of an undersea ecosystem like this. That's a future thing, most likely. But right now, we are really focused on on capital investments to allow us to get a first iteration to show the purpose and validation of the business model. And that then we think will drive a number of investors to get more excited about what we're trying to do here at Proteus.
Have you conducted any impact studies on the impact of building a Proteus in Curacao on the undersea environment on the reef?
We sure have. As a matter of fact, that's part of the permitting process. Is you do have to do environmental impact assessment. We've actually completed our interim. It goes in 3 phases. The first is a environmental study. Here's where I want to go. Here's the environment around it. And if there's anything of concern, let's report that. So that's how we're going to protect that. The second stage is a geophysical inspection, where we'll look at the seabed floor. How far down do I have to go before I hit hard rock, or is it sand all the way? So that then drives the different ways to build foundations. And then the third part of that then is, given those 2 pieces of data, government, here's what the environmental impact, here's where things will touch the seabed floor. Here's how far I am away from a coral reef or mangroves or seagrass. And then the government has a total perspective about the investment, potential impact, but then the environmental returns that come from putting this Proteus experience on off of the host nation's waters. So that's essentially how the process works in Curacao. And I think it'll be very similar in most of our other countries that we're talking to as well.
Have you been approved for a specific site in Curacao?
So we have 2 sites that we're looking at predominantly. We've let the government know they're both of interest. I think they understand. They're interested in seeing our technical data about those. And if they both pass the government's interest, it'll be up to us to select which one we prefer.
It is a bit of a gamble because nobody's done this really before at this scale. And so it is kind of a gamble. You could do all the, the core samples for foundational structure and all this kind of stuff and impact studies on the coral reef and marine habitat and that type of thing. But you don't know until you do it. Somebody's going to have to roll the dice and take a risk and say, well, let's just try it and see what actually happens. Because generally, things don't always go the way that you plan plan them to
Absolutely.
go. And there is going to be some kind of, oh, we didn't expect that. Oh, wow, this impacted this. And which brings me to the power supply. Power. Where are you going to get the power? Are you running, lines underwater for electrical power? Are you doing solar? And is solar even capable at that depth?
Yeah, so there are a couple approaches to power generation supply to the habitat. If for an appropriate host nation or site that has infrastructure close by the shore, we can collect it. We'll run it through an umbilical, essentially a cable that could be 3 or 4 inches thick. We'll run it through the seabed floor up to the habitat. That's from a cost and risk perspective. That's actually not a bad way to do it. Plus, the host country, it's the fact that we want to be using sustainable sources, it helps drives their investment decisions at our host country as well. So if they were anticipating putting solar or wind in an area, if we say we would like that to be a source, we're finding those countries are being very amenable to drive an investment to support that. Now, we will say as we go to future sites, not every site will necessarily have the infrastructure close by. So we may need to come up with a source generation that sits, let's say, on a buoy or a platform that sits on the surface of the water.
Right. That
So
was my next question.
yeah,
That was going to be my next
so, so,
question.
so,
Yeah.
we're, so, we're des- so we're designed for both, John. I mean, if you, so one thing I've learned in aerospace defense, as soon as you design for one single point of failure, you will fail. So we need to have different design alternatives to handle different orientations and different customers, and that's how we approach almost every aspect of Proteus.
When you talk about the information and data and things that we can learn by being underwater for extended periods of time in multiple locations, big picture, what do you hope to learn? What kind of data are you hoping to collect?
Well, the world does a pretty good job of getting very broad data sets. U.S. agency NOAA, National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Association, has buoys and data collection all around the world. Very big data in small data sets and large areas. We think we can really take what we call hyperlocal data, very specific localized data about what happens in a reef given a temperature or current change. How does a robot approach a collection of fish? How does a human and robot interact on the seabed floor doing a core sampling operation? So And then how does that impact the environment all around it? So we're looking at taking this hyper-localized data, feeding it back into these global data sets and say, hey, can we really accelerate the learning what happened on a global scale? What happened here in the Caribbean, or what happened in the Red Sea, or what happened over in the Western Pacific? And how do these two interact? How does a global event manifest itself hyperlocally or vice versa? And then how can we take that information, then make decisions around everything from better transportation, better sensors, carbon dioxide removal? Is there a way to look at how we store carbon in these small, and what are the impacts to the hyper-localized area? So we think there's a lot of things to learn by really looking at small portions of the region, and then again, having the humans and robots work together to ingest that information and put it back into the global networks.
Are you planning to live underwater for an extended period of time once this is built?
I just got my PADI dive certification. I'm a big fan of walking the talk, John. I just got my dive certification. I will be the first day Fabian asked me to go. I will be under it right along with him.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I wish you and everybody and the entire team so much luck and perseverance to keep it going. And hopefully, we can see a design. Did you say in 2025?
Early 2025, looking for a design reveal.
Yeah.
That's our current target. We'll make sure you're one of the first ones to know when it's going to come out.
Boy, I'd love to get down there, man. That'd be fantastic. And are you going to have like, pricing structures like reservations like Disney? Is it going to cost like, $10,000 to go?
Yeah. We have a whole sales team, business development team that's thinking that through right now. So
I'm sure you do.
At some point we will. I'm not sure that's how we're going to launch, but at some point we probably will.
So Randy, you're a scientist and an engineer, and you're on this Proteus project. What are you curious about? And then what keeps you up at night?
Oh boy, a lot of things. I'm curious about how we treat the ocean like the friend and companion it's supposed to be. I'm concerned the ocean's being treated a little bit like a cesspool or garbage can for unwanted things, and we need to change that. And I think it goes back to, Fabian uses a very, very famous quotation, John, that I like to use because it's meaningful. We protect what we love what we understand what we're taught. We need, and this is how we compress that and go from the teaching to the protecting is really important. It's something that keeps me up at night and say, I'm honored to be part of that process. I don't know if I'm doing enough, but I know it's important because I look at my children and I look at their children. And we need to leave them a healthy ocean. We need to leave them an ocean economy that thrives and makes their kids and their kids' kids much better off than we are today.
Well, I wish you a lot of luck in moving forward. I hope we can talk to you again as Proteus and the project move forward from design concepts and the revealing of your interior living habitat to practical build out. I hope you'll keep us informed all along the way, and we'll have you back on the show to tell us all about it.
Absolutely. Thank you, John, for the time again to tell about the journey of Proteus Ocean Group.
Ignition Sequence is produced by Accelerator Media, a nonprofit organization dedicated to inspiring a lifelong pursuit of knowledge. Join us every week as we dive into the science, the stories, and the extraordinary journeys that challenge our understanding of the world. Subscribe now and ignite your curiosity with us. Ignition Sequence. Listen, learn, repeat.